Hello, I'm going to take you all through a TouchDesigner project that I finished a little bit ago. It was for a class that required an interactive installation piece, and so I think for that reason I can't internally let this project go until it's in other people's hands. And so the project files are in the description if you want to try it out. You will need TouchDesigner. It's just a TOE file, but it's a pretty cool tool, and I'm going to do a demonstration and air some thoughts around it, so it'll be like a demo with commentary to see if you really want to try it out for yourself. I call the project It's Just Frequency, and that's because it presents the relationship between rhythm and pitch and how they're essentially the same thing. They're both just frequency, but the title is also a double entendre because all of the note relationships we'll use throughout the project are inside the realm of just intonation, which I'll explain a little bit later. But before I get ahead of myself, I can show you how this all works. So let me just get this started. The two numbers represent two different frequencies. They're not the actual frequencies, they just represent the ratio between the two. For this project, the actual frequencies don't matter, just the juxtaposition. And so if you look at this controller, the left and right buttons increment the respective frequencies. And as you can tell, it plays back the polyrhythm created between the two. And so effectively at this stage, it's just a polyrhythm generator, which is pretty fun in its own right. And so you can, increment as far up as you want, create any polyrhythm. And so let's say at some point, at any point, if you want to, you can hit the third toggle, and keeping the same ratio, the frequencies will increase in speed to a point where they are then discernible as like a pitch interval. And so this creates the perfect transition between these two different states and unambiguously presents them as the same phenomena at two different speeds. From my understanding, the reason why us as humans have such a distinction between rhythm and pitch is literally because our brains recognize frequency in two different ways. Where frequency is this objective, ordered repetition of phenomena, when it's slow enough, our brain recognizes it as such. It's this distinct, objective beat. But as it gets faster, it gets muddy and beats get indistinguishable, and it eventually comes out as this new tonal thing. And from my understanding, that pitch is purely subjective. It's just how our brains interpret high frequencies and allow us to perceive high frequencies. And so this program, this network, allows us into that muddy zone, that zone in between objectivity and subjectivity. And it's this world in between rhythm and pitch that's like a mess of atonal noise. But that mess of atonal noise is just as consonant or dissonant as its sped up counterpart. We just don't, perceive it as such. And that kind of changed my perspective on consonance a little bit. I might as well talk about the fact that this project isn't really about the relationship of rhythm and pitch. It's about the relationship between a polyrhythm and a musical interval. It's about the relationship of two different frequencies, because if you'll notice, the fastest frequency when ascending to the musical interval will always top off at the same frequency. So you're not going to hear any stark variation there. The only thing you're going to be able to listen for is the minute differences in consonance and dissonance and the pleasantness and the beats in it. And because we can only listen for consonants, the only difference there in that top part is consonants. We have to think about where it's derived from that polyrhythm. And we start to think of rhythm as being consonant, which is something that I never really thought of before. But going along the lines of this project, if we understand pitch and rhythm as being the same thing, then certainly we understand musical intervals as being consonant. So a polyrhythm would have to have some kind of consonance. And you start to, when exploring different polyrhythms, you start to see that like the general catchiness of a polyrhythm generally reflects the consonants of its respective musical interval. And like if you think about even like if you went to a house concert or something, you're making a house beat and you had like 4 on the floor kick drums and snare on the 2 and 4. That is essentially a 2 on 4 polyrhythm, which is just an octave, which is as consonant as can absolutely be. And that the 4 on the floor with the 2 snare sound, or the beat, is fairly catchy and simple. And so rhythm truly has a consonance. So what is just intonation? If you think of a tuning system as the division of the octave, in just intonation, you take that root note, and to get the next 11 divisions, you use simple mathematic ratios with respect to that tonal center. And you'll recognize the note ratios from throughout this project. And so what you do is you create this system around the very physics of sound. And because of that, note relationships sound very pure. If you've noticed throughout this program, throughout this demonstration, like those note relationships sound like perfect, and there's like no beats at all. They just they sound thick and full. And if you don't know why we don't use this system typically in music, let's quickly go over to Ableton. All right, we're in Ableton. So if just intonation is faithful to reality, why don't we use it in like conventional Western music composition? If we look back to the justly intoned octave, all of those note divisions are relative to the tonic and not really to each other. And so that octave is not going to have equally spaced notes. And most Western musical instruments are tuned to equal temperament, which takes an octave and splits it into 12 equally spaced notes. And obviously that gets rid of the consonant purity that's in just intonation, but very importantly, it allows for continuity between keys. So if I play C major, sounds like C major, and if I play E major with the same tuning, they essentially sound the same, but just 4 semitones apart. But I mean, if you really listen to it, we've been trained to think of that as in tune, but it sounds kind of warbly. If you deep listen to it, we're going to use the Microtuner, which is a super powerful MIDI effect. And it essentially, as long as you can program in the correct frequencies, you can use any microtonal tuning you want. It's really simple because it adds the ability to independently pitch bend all of the notes on the piano or on the scale. So, yeah. And one of the defaults here is just 12, which is a justly intoned octave. And immediately, if we play a C major, that sounds like it couldn't be more in tune. It sounds powerful. But if we go back, I mean, like, even listen to the major 7th. This melancholic chord almost has the quality of like a power chord. It's absurd how perfect it sounds. But if we go back to the equal temperament, which is what we always play in, it sounds out of tune now. It's crazy. But in this holds the power of just intonation, but its greatest downside is if we go to play E major like we did before, it sounds like that, which is obviously not what we want. And if we go back to equal temperament, it sounds like E major. And so obviously just intonation, it doesn't work in our Western music system, but I gravitate towards it, at least like ideologically, because it's part of nature and it's sound as it exists in its simplest terms. And if I can if I can find a way to break outside of Western music norms and make something digestible with, you know, a justly intoned scale, I feel like that's kind of like a goal for my personal music. But that's besides the point. With that context for just intonation and understanding what we're using, let's head back to TouchDesigner. There's more here I could talk about, but for your sake and my own, I'm just going to leave the context off here. I'm not going to be too much longer because I want y'all to use this, but I want to talk a little bit about actually using it. I'm sure you've noticed this funky microcontroller I'm using. I'm only using it because the assignment I did this project for necessitated its usage. It's the Adafruit Circuit Playground. It's got some cool onboard capabilities, but I only used three like 0-1 toggles essentially. And because, as I imagine most of you don't have this, I went ahead and mapped the inputs to left, right, and middle click on a mouse, and you can go over here to switch that. And you can see it's kind of annoying to use inside of TouchDesigner because, you know, it's interactive. But if you open a separate window or go to perform mode, it's not interactive. So you can kind of go as wild as you want. But if by chance you do have the Circuit Playground and you have the drivers and you want to use it, the INO file is also in the description, so use it if you want to. And even though this project is saturated with mathematics and order, I try to approach it more with like a sense of curiosity and you know, exploring just intonation and listening to polyrhythms. It not only exists in the world of music, but like, you know, it exists in nature and it's part of universal harmony. And at least for me, there's like more weight with every beat. And so I often just open this and explore it myself. And I find a lot of inspiration in just intonation. And I'm sure you've noticed the consonants and interval labels by now. I put a lot of research into them, and obviously some of them get pretty absurd, like the notion that within just intonation, depending on the scale, you can major second has two different fundamental ratios. It's kind of wild, but some of them get really crazy, and you can see here if you look into this table. This is where I stored all of them, and most of them I have a grasp over, but some of them, like the tridecimals and the undecimals, those all come from limit, like harmonic limit tunings and scales, which I couldn't even try to describe. Definitely do research into esoteric Zen harmonic tunings, but I won't get into that now. Not that I really could, but there's other stuff I would really like to delve into, but I won't. I've rambled on enough. I just want you all to use this if you see value in it, obviously. But even if you don't download it, I hope me vomiting some of my musical findings has helped in some way. Thank you for watching, and if you take anything away, appreciate just intonation and use it if you can. Thank you. Bye.